I'm not saying the Arrowverse shows are good, and I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just asking you to hear me out. The CWDC shows are a lot like crime shows in the late 2000s. Shows like NCIS, CSI, or Cold Case. They're cheap to make, extremely formulaic, and better yet, characters, villains, and plot points can survive cancellation by being recycled from one show to another. Almost like a WWE draft. Kinda like what happened with Constantine after his NBC show got canceled.
Bollocks.
The flexibility of these characters, combined with the bingeable nature of the shows and their franchise's built-in fan bases, all contribute to why there are so many superhero procedurals on TV right now. Just like there used to be as many, if not more, crime procedurals. Back in the 2000s, you couldn't flip through 2 channels without finding reruns of Law & Order, CSI London, or NCIS Mordor. And now it's just as hard to flip through any streaming services without seeing stuff like Inhumans, Gifted, or Pennyworth. So today, I want to dig into why that is, what makes these shows so appealing, and what they could be doing better. PewDiePie recently made a video goofing on some clips from Supergirl.
Supergirl bad!
Now, obviously, Pewds hasn't seen the shows, and he's even gone as far as to say that he doesn't like superheroes in the past. But that didn't stop thousands of people from parodying those jokes as legitimate criticism.
Because clearly the writers is just giving up too. They're just posting at this point.
Leroy Jenkins!
That's right, a character from Supergirl just yelled Leroy Jenkins, unironically. In 2020. It might be time to cancel the show, guys. I'm sorry.
I'm not gonna lie, I kinda think a little bit of what he said was valid.
This looks like some PlayStation 2 level of CGI, honestly.
But a lot of it felt played up for the sake of commentary.
One person does one thing, and then there's another thing, and then switches to another thing, and catches a bullet, and then she changes...
PewDiePie doesn't even like superheroes. So how would he have any sort of frame of reference for what these shows are supposed to be?
I wouldn't do that. But yeah, Supergirl sucks. It sucks. It really sucks. As you can see by these numbers. Like, just don't take my word for it. Just take this dropout.
Not to mention that the entire crux of his argument falls back on the declining viewership ratings, without ever considering that most people have switched to streaming services in the 5 years since the show premiered. And services like Netflix don't make their numbers publicly available. So there's no real way to actually tell how many people are or aren't watching the show anymore.
Who funds these shows? Why are they sinking so much money into these TV shows that I don't understand why anyone would watch?
Without a proper frame of reference, you would never understand that a show like Legends of Tomorrow is supposed to carry a tone that's more similar to Batman 66 or Power Rangers than that of a show like Daredevil or Legion. These aren't supposed to be blockbuster superhero movies. They're more like slice-of-life soap operas that just happen to involve superheroes. Some of my favorite issues of Ultimate Spider-Man weren't the ones where Peter was fighting whatever villain of the week. They were the ones where Peter and MJ were playing superhero all by themselves with no help from anyone else.
I just have to finish stitching up a hole in the butt and then I'll give it back to you.
I can explain the hole in the butt, by the way.
Please don't.
Or when Peter was coming home at 5 a.m. and had to deal with the wrath of Aunt May. The family drama angles of these stories still feel fresh and interesting, because these aren't problems that you can punch out of existence. I won't lie though, it does get annoying when shows like Arrow overuse the same plot points season after season though.
I was lying to protect you.
You hurt me with your lies.
I hurt you to protect you.
I do not need your protection. Goodbye. I'm leaving to do a Lifetime movie until they write me back in the script again.
Which brings me to one of the most common criticisms that I see, which is actually something I kind of agree with. These shows frequently rely on cliche writing, and the tones of these shows often feel goofy and non-serious during what would otherwise be a serious moment.
This is my problem, because you were solving my problem.
Okay, well, our problem is that the calculator now has everything he needs to melt the internet. I love the internet.
And I think that serves 2 purposes. The first is that the tone of these shows aren't supposed to be overly dark and serious. These shows are supposed to feel campy and over the top. It's part of their stylization. If things seem silly, that's intentional. These are shows that have musical numbers, reality-changing imps, and all sorts of shenanigans. These shows serve as love letters to Silver Age media in the same way that shows like Batman the Brave and the Bold did. And relying on tropes and cliches is a lot of what makes these shows feel so familiar. It's an intentional way of leaning into that stylization. Now that might just be me as a fanboy trying to justify why I find bad writing entertaining, so let me tell you the other purpose that it serves. A lot of these shows rely on crews of writers, of which are often unexperienced or new to the industry. These aren't people that are setting out to make nuanced art pieces, because the CW doesn't care if they're making something like Batman 66 or something like The Dark Knight. What they care about is ROI, and what that means is keeping things on time and under budget. The turnaround time on these shows is pretty fast, often not leaving a lot of time for script rewrites or reworking otherwise shoddy CGI. During an interview about Crisis on Infinite Earths, the event was compared to Avengers Endgame, and in response, one of the Arrowverse's co-creators, Mark Guggenheim, had this to say.
I hate the comparison to Endgame, because we're operating on a much smaller budget. We're basically producing these shows for the Marvel Studios catering budget, so I hate that comparison.
A lot of what people want and expect of these shows is just stuff that they were never intended on being able to deliver. It's like asking a show like CSI Miami to start doing Mission Impossible style helicopter stunts and car chases. These shows are made so cheaply and so quickly that they can never pull that off, given that that's not what the show was designed around. And besides, when it comes to goofy cliches, there are actually a few of them that I kind of love, despite my reservations for others. Like anytime Joe West gives a dad talk, it usually ends up being one of the best moments of the episode, and sometimes of the season. And Brainiac 5, serving as a bargain bin Spock, has been entertaining as fuck for me. As cliche as he may be written, he's grown into one of my favorite characters in the Arrowverse.
We'll find that bouncing bundle of Kryptonian joy faster than a flying Flacurian.
And anytime that grand epic music begins playing, and Flash beats a problem just by running straight into it, it just gets me so hype, even if it's the same thing solved the same way every single time. Those moments are what make these shows so great for me. They make me feel like I'm watching Saturday morning cartoons again. But the problem is that in one 45-minute episode, you might have 30 minutes of B-plot garbage relationship drama and soap opera bullshit. But then at the end, you get 15 minutes of excellence. 15 minutes of balls to the wall, Silver Age action that knock the previous 30 out of the park. And that's what keeps me coming back for more. This is gonna be an odd comparison, but hear me out. My favorite movie is Clerks, and it's not my favorite movie because it's flawless, or because it's got beautiful cinematography, or because it left me with some sort of thought-provoking insight.
You know, there's a million fine-looking women in the world, dude, but they don't all bring you lasagna at work. Most of them just cheat on you.
It's my favorite movie because they managed to do so much with so little. It's a movie that a college dropout and his friends made on a shoestring budget with nothing but a couple $1,000s, a solid script, and a little bit of hope. And while the Arrowverse shows are obviously created with budgets that are a lot bigger and they're done on a professional level, they still give me a similar vibe when they're at their best. Because when they're at the top of their game, the passion put into the script bleeds out through the actors' performances, and every minute keeps you on the edge of your seat. And coincidentally, that college dropout I mentioned earlier actually ended up running a few episodes of these shows. So the doing a lot with a little mentality still holds true when it comes down to what these shows are able to pull off. Especially given their tight budgets, constant deadlines, and quick turnaround times. Sure, it's definitely formulaic, but sometimes that formula can be comfortable. Like an adult episode of Power Rangers. Hero has an issue in their personal life, new villain of the week has a similar issue that contrasts that of the heroes, hero has a limitation with their power that the villain is able to exploit to their advantage, the hero overcomes the exploit by overcoming the issue in their personal life, maybe there's a MacGuffin thrown in there, rinse and repeat next episode. But is that formula really such a bad thing? Consider the McDonald's cheeseburger. That's right, this greasy, disgusting heart attack on a bun.
Good for you! That thing is a heart attack on a bun!
No, Squidward, I meant good for your soul.
Oh, please! I have no soul.
By all standards of comparison, this is a bad cheeseburger. It's got tiny, abysmally small meat flaps, the cheese isn't melty enough, the buns are utterly smushed together, and it's a drenched, greasy mess. But when you're in a strange place, thousands of miles from home, and you see a McDonald's, and you buy that cheeseburger, the second you bite into it, you taste that same familiar taste that every single McDonald's burger has. And for a brief moment, you feel at home again. That's the power of consistency. That's the power of a formula.
That's the power of Pine Sol, baby.
predictable results, and comfort. And that's why I find myself more inclined to catch up with a B or C grade show like Flash or Supergirl than start new seasons of other shows that may carry a higher IMDb rating. With Flash or Supergirl, I know what I'm getting. I know it may be mediocre, but I don't really mind it, because I know that by the end of the episode, I'll probably be bored enough to not watch another one and go do something else, like finish editing this video. Unlike Punisher or Mr. Robot, not every single episode of Flash ends on a cliffhanger that leaves me craving the next episode like a rat looking for its medicated IV drip. But another reason these shows are prone to suffering is the CGI work. Seeing as I grew up watching stuff like Lost and Spy Kids, my tolerance for bad CGI tends to be a lot higher than other people's. But seeing as it gets brought up a lot, I thought I should at least mention it, because the CGI presents a larger problem outside of just looking bad. One reason for the shoddy CGI work is as simple as time and budget. The episodes and scenes that use CGI often take so long that they're shot first or out of order ahead of the other episodes. Like any anime or entire seasons of The Walking Dead, these shows rely on lower budgeted episodes to make up for the bigger budget, more CGI heavy episodes. In some cases, the filler can be used as a way to develop side characters or explore character relationships that we wouldn't ordinarily see. But others cut costs by having the entire episode take place in one setting, like a bottle episode. Legends does this a lot, apparently. But there are a lot of different ways you can do filler, and one of the more interesting examples of that came from Season 4 of Supergirl. Supergirl's 4th season had so many ups and downs. Sometimes I liked its political messages, and other times I thought they were heavy-handed, overreaching, and kinda cringy. Sometimes I thought they did too much, and other times I didn't think they did enough, or they did it in the wrong way despite having good intentions. And that's not to say I'm opposed to political messaging in comic book media. It's just that shows like Doom Patrol do a much better job introducing those ideas and perspectives in much more nuanced ways than shows like Supergirl. While I find myself identifying with characters like Larry, Danny, and Rita, I've never found any of that same relatability in characters from Supergirl, particularly in the LGBT characters like Alex or Nia. There's just a lack of nuance there. The character's orientation is often pushed so far to the forefront of their characterization that it doesn't leave much time for anything else. But in the case of Doom Patrol, a DC Universe exclusive that the CW has nothing to do with, the characterization is a lot more in-depth. Larry is portrayed as a complex character who deals with depression, anxiety, and haunting memories of the past, and just happens to be a gay man. They never have to acknowledge or create any sort of unrealistic conflict relating to his sexuality, because all of those conflicts are built into the backstory in a natural way. While the trauma relating to that is a focal point of the character's backstory and development, it's not the only plot point for the character. Plus, its execution is what makes it a compelling story that I can empathize with. I totally get what it's like to hide the song inside your heart.
Then get up there.
I don't sing.
But compare that to Nia Nal. She's introduced slowly and naturally. Her status as a trans woman isn't focal to her character at first, but after the audience becomes aware of it, it becomes the focal point of the character from that point forward. The reveal isn't done for the sake of drama, but because Nia can actually relate to the people facing oppression in the story. I actually really liked this at first, but it was everything they did after that I had a problem with. And don't twist my words, this is undoubtedly a step in the right direction, and I really liked what they had done with the character up until this point. It was all good stuff, but everything after this is where her character development starts to kind of go downhill. A few episodes later, you find out that she's also an alien, which, again, is to be expected from a show like Supergirl, so it's not that surprising. But then we find out that the alien species she's a part of has magic dream powers that are only passed down to the women in the family. This results in a plotline where Nia's grandmother dies, and the powers skip her older sister, and she gets them instead, causing her sister to get angry and reference the fact that Nia is a trans woman and not a cis woman. The big difference between the way these stories are told is that in DCU's Doom Patrol, we feel the story through watching Larry process his trauma. People don't keep bringing it up and asking about it, but the impact of it still resonates. But with Nia, there are entire episodes centered around her gender and alien status, and how they affect her powers and her relationships with others. Her entire arc as an employee and journalist screeches to a halt in favor of her only having conflicts that relate to her status as an alien, as a trans woman, or her relationship with Brainiac 5. Everything else is thrown out the window. After the reveal, these issues are the only parts of her character arc that we ever get to see. A big part of Nia's backstory was working with Cat Grant in the White House. They had already established that she was a writer well before she started working at Catco. But after she becomes Dreamer, all of that characterization gets completely abandoned, which is a shame, because I think Nia has the potential to be a great character. Put simply, Doom Patrol has a character who happens to be gay, and while moments of their character arc reflect that, not everything in their life is affected by that. He's not a token gay character. He's a normal character who happens to be gay. And Supergirl has a character whose entire character arc, stories, and presence seemingly derive from the fact that she's transgender. She's not a character who happens to be trans, she's a token trans character. Now, like I said before, don't twist my words. I think that the CW definitely had good intentions with this character, I just think that the execution was kind of poor. Kinda like if you look back at the original Luke Cage comics that are really offensive in retrospect. But moving away from that comparison, the rest of Supergirl's 4th season focused on a plot about anti-alien extremists that start a grassroots movement to catalog and deport aliens that are hiding in plain sight amongst the humans. The political imagery here is way less than subtle, in a way that exaggerates the subject matter so much that it kind of skews the political messaging to the point of parody, just by making it so goofy, campy, and over the top. There's literally no nuance to these takes on Trump and immigration.
Are asking, how can we tolerate this in a government that is supposed to be for the people?
That meant to imply that aliens aren't?
Aren't what?
People.
All this builds and builds and builds until eventually the alien immigrant refugees and the right-wing the anti-alien protesters clash during a rally, all with Supergirl and the Superfriends caught in the middle of it. But that buildup of pure stupidity actually ended up leading to something amazing. All of these moments build up to the resolution of the arc, where it's revealed that Lex Luthor was actually pulling the strings the whole time, and was actively pitting both of the groups against one another for his own means. They basically planned a whole season of filler because they couldn't afford to pay Lex's actor for the whole season.
Superman made me do it. I am protecting mankind from an extinction event. And if this pearl-clutching jury of my peers wants to put me behind bars for it, they are welcome to try. But know this, I will always have my thumb on the scales.
But hot damn was it worth it. Because for 3 entire episodes, it just becomes the Lex Luthor show, and he owns every minute of it. There are so many great moments of action here. You can say what you might about the CGI, but in Season 4, Episode 17, the scene of Supergirl catching Martian Manhunter as he fell from the sky had me on the edge of my seat. And that's what these shows are like at their best. It's what they build up to. And better yet, what I had at first thought was a dumb, overreaching metaphor for Trump's America, and why we should trust the mainstream media, was actually a metaphor for how both politicians and companies like CNN and Fox actively try to create discourse amongst the populace by waging PR wars and pushing purposefully misleading headlines.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
At least that's how I perceived it anyway. But the next season takes it a step further when Catco Media, a reputable news source in the world of Supergirl, is bought out and turned into a cheap, gossip-ridden tabloid, which kinda reminds me of what happened when Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. But getting back on topic, when it came to Season 4, the juxtaposition of what I thought the narrative was going to be versus what the end result actually ended up being was kind of brilliant. Lex took control of the narrative from the right, and he used it to fight the left, and then took advantage of a moment of weakness after the infighting between them to leverage an upper hand over both, taking complete control of the situation from both sides. There's actually a story about how a Russian troll farm organized two opposing protests directly across the street from each other. The intention with that was to further the tension and divide against Americans, because a weaker, divided America means more power for an authoritarian country like Russia. It makes it easier for them to take advantage of desperate situations, or desperate people in positions of power, in order to gain influence in the future. It's not about what happens today, it's about the long game. And likewise, when Supergirl is at her lowest point, and the far right, the alien extremists have served their role, it becomes much easier to show your hand and begin manipulating more overtly. I don't think it's any coincidence that these same episodes involved Luthor teaming up with a former Soviet state to create a Supergirl clone, going through all of that effort just to make Supergirl look bad in order to make Lex look good. Again, these shows do have their cliches, but when they do something clever like this, man, they just knock it out of the ballpark. Even though you did have to watch a good 14 episodes of bullshit filler arc and some political messaging that just does not land in order to get to the 3 or 4 really good episodes. But that's why I watch these episodes while I wash dishes and edit videos. These aren't shows I watch while I relax, these are shows I watch to keep busy. Which isn't to say that I don't wish these shows tried a little bit harder or took themselves a little bit more seriously, because when these shows are at their best, they're just as good, if not better, than some of the worst Marvel movies. Which I know wasn't exactly a high bar to jump over, but it does bring me to my next point. Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Oliver, it is time. Has the planet been evacuated yet? Not entirely. Then it's not time.
One thing is certain. Everything we know, everything there is, and everything there ever was, is doomed.
Crisis was the most ambitious endeavor the CWverse has attempted yet. It was like all their previous crossovers, but dialed up to a 10. Not only did it involve every show on the CW, but it also retroactively created a multiverse comprised of nearly every TV show and film adaptation that DC's ever created. From the Flash and Supergirl cartoons to Batman 66, Lucifer, and even Tim Burton's Batman movie. It all gets referenced. And on top of all that fan service, the budget and technical aspects of the crossover were dialed up to a 10 as well, with Crisis feeling more like a TV movie than 5 individual episodes of different TV shows. The special ended up featuring some really well-filmed, iconic moments, all with better writing, editing, camera work, and cinematography than the Arrowverse is used to. The 4th episode in particular was filmed with entirely different movie cameras than the shows are usually made with, and featured way better cinematography and directing that really shifted the tone of the show drastically. But this wasn't even the first example of a DC show stepping above and beyond the norm. Non-CW shows like Titans, Swamp Thing, and Doom Patrol are proof that when the CW isn't involved, or when the CW takes a step back, the newfound creative freedom allows the writing room a lot more room to function, without constantly being constrained by forced soap opera drama and B-plots that ultimately lead nowhere. And I'm really glad that the CW took a step back and just let DC do their thing, because it gave Crisis a vibe that's way more similar to a show like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Titans than a show like Arrow or Supergirl. If anyone here watches Riverdale or Sabrina, I know, probably not your wheelhouse, but hear me out. They're comic-based TV shows too, so the same thing kind of applies there. If you watch an episode or 2 of Riverdale and then compare it to an episode or 2 of Sabrina, you can see the extent of influence that the CW has over a show like Riverdale compared to the Netflix-produced Sabrina. Despite sharing the same producers, the same writers, and even the same source material and continuity, in Sabrina, things are much more dark, and they're allowed to show more blood and satanic imagery, seeing as they're not confined by the restraints of network censors. But Riverdale still has to work with those TV restrictions, and CW's executive meddling. So despite a couple of bloody moments, it never really goes all in the same way that Sabrina does. And my point with that is that the same thing applies to the DC Universe shows in comparison to the CWverse shows. Despite having similar budgets and goals, their tones differ drastically. Titans takes itself a lot more seriously. Rather than leaning into the 50s and 60s Silver Age shenanigans, they lean more into a 90s grimdark tone. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse.
Fuck that.
But that tone makes the show feel really unique, and I actually really enjoy it. and Doom Patrol and Swamp Thing lean more heavily into serious themes that the CW could never handle in a serious manner without making it seem like a joke. They deal with themes relating to emotional trauma, environmental pollution, body dysmorphia, and sexuality, all in ways that feel a lot more serious and carry a lot more weight than their CW counterparts. And I think it's because of the over-the-top campy writing style that the CW forces every single show on the network to have. It's not just the Arrowverse and Riverdale. Supernatural, The 100, the shitty new Charmed reboot, they all suffer from this. And that's why I think that shows like Doom Patrol handle social issues in a way more believable and relatable way than shows like Supergirl. On the CW, long-lasting issues are wrapped up within a 45-minute episode and never brought up again. But in a show like Doom Patrol, the trauma from these wounds resonates, and overcoming that trauma serves as a central theme of the show, rather than the central theme of a single episode. As much as I love the tone and campy nature of the CW shows, I think it really holds them back from being all they can be. But just like the original Crisis in the comics shifted the tone of the universe from the Silver Age into the Bronze Age, with less Ace and Batmite and more Batman Year One, I think that specials like Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Luthor arc, and the DC Universe line of shows all give me hope that maybe after a crisis or two, the Arrowverse will be in a lot better place than it is now.
This is not a condemned building. No, listen, this is an old Star Labs research facility that nobody uses. And what's even better, no one knows it exists.
Good for you.
No, good for us. I figure we could all use this to gather if anything ever happens again.
It's a great idea, Barry.
Thanks, Superman.
It's a better option than you all dropping by the DEO.
Why do we even need it? I mean, how often does the world almost come to an end? Oh, it's like that.
It's actually kind of funny that I mentioned that the CW should take inspiration from DC Universe, because they recently announced that DC Universe and CW are going to be co-broadcasting the new series Stargirl, and it was also announced that the CW is going to be re-airing Swamp Thing in the fall. Now, I don't know if that's really clever cross-promotion, or they just lost so much money with DC Universe that they're trying to recoup it elsewhere by spreading the shows to a wider audience. But regardless, it's something to take note of. Only time will tell if the DC Universe shows end up influencing the CW shows, or if it ends up the other way around, like what happened with Supergirl when it was switched from CBS to the CW. Now, if you still think these shows are shit, that's completely okay. And I appreciate you hearing me out. Sometimes understanding the appeal of something you don't like can help you grow as a creator and can stop you from being such an asshole about someone liking something that you view as low-grade art. But if you still feel inclined to shit on the CW shows, go ahead. Do it in my comment section even. Because as much as I may love these shows, I hate the Fast and Furious movies just as much as PewDiePie does Supergirl. And I'll shit on those movies any day of the week. But regardless, I'd like to hear your thoughts about the CW shows and the DC Universe ones in the comments down below. What's your take on it? What do you enjoy about them, or what do you think they could improve? And as always, liking the video really helps it get pushed in the algorithm, and subscriptions are always appreciated. Before we go, I'd also like to thank my supporters on Patreon, and let you know that if you like this video, there's a good chance you'll enjoy my deep dive into the world of Marvel toys, or the history of the Joker. Now with all that being said, I've been Swim Team Captain 7 of Super Swim Team 7, signing off.